Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. The countdown to kickoff continues here on the show this week. Another annual preview episode of ours. Today it will be previewing the defense and the special teams for Purdue ahead of the 2022 season. Ron English takes over as the play caller on D after Brad Lambert took off for Wake Forest. There won't be any huge changes to the scheme or philosophy, but as always, there will be personnel changes. We'll preview that defense today before looking into the special teams. Much more of a mixed bag there last year. Very up, very down. Can they improve and be a little bit more consistent? We will go into that. Plus, the Big Ten's media rights agreement is coming soon. The numbers are coming out, and they are huge. We'll talk about what we know, what's being speculated by some of the better sources out there, and ultimately look at how that impacts the league. There is a whole lot to talk about today, so let's stop wasting time and jump on in. If you don't already, give the show a follow on Twitter. We are at Boilers Beyond and always talking college sports around there, so be sure to follow and join the conversation. Tweet me things you want to hear on the show, things you want me to talk more about, things you want me to talk less about, whatever you guys want to hear. And be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. We are here every week for you, and we're not going anywhere anytime soon. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts for more. The AP poll, I want to touch on that before we get into the defense preview. It did come out today. Purdue received 17 votes. If you kind of look at that just from the vote total, that would put Purdue in 34th place. I think 4 or 5 voters had Purdue on their top 25 ballots. You know, look, I didn't expect Purdue to be in the top 25. If I were voting, I don't know that I would have put Purdue in the top 25. I certainly think they should and would be in the top 25 if they can get past Penn State week 1. That is certainly an if. The Big Ten only had 4 teams in the top 25. It surprised me a bit to not see Iowa or Penn State in there. Minnesota was right there in the 30s with Purdue as well receiving votes. The top 3 out in the East, Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, and then Wisconsin from the West were all ranked. Look, it's the preseason AP poll. It doesn't always mean that much, but it's a decent barometer of how national opinion is of the program. And look, to be at least recognized in the receiving votes category, I think that is probably where Purdue fits in well, with room to go up and room to go down. That's where Purdue is. And with the previews today and next week, maybe you'll have a better feel of where you think Purdue should be coming into this season. On the defensive side of the ball, it will be a new play caller for the 4th straight year now. Nick Holt, Bob Diaco, Brad Lambert, and now Ron English will be calling the plays on the defensive side of the ball, but it will be much more continuous. There's a lot more continuity with the defense now because Ron English was in that room a year ago, involved with Brad Lambert, involved with Mark Hagan, who's back as the defensive line coach, and you've got David Elson in there with the linebackers, Ashton Yabodi with the corners. It's a good group of coaches there. There's a lot of experience. You know how I feel about Mark Hagan. This is a good group on defense. They were fantastic a year ago, all things considered. Purdue doesn't, and when you look at the history of Purdue, outside of the 2003 team, really, there haven't been very many Purdue teams that have won because of their defense. Now, I know for older listeners, yes, there was the junk defense teams back of the late 70s, early 80s, but for the most part, this is a program that wins because of the offense. But to do what Purdue did on defense last year, I think was very smart. Jeff Brom said no more with the bend but don't break approach that both Nick Holt and Bob Diaco employed, and said we're going to go be more aggressive. And they went out, they rushed the passer, they were able to force some turnovers. You saw a couple of road wins at Iowa and at Nebraska, really propelled by turnovers. You saw them get to the quarterback. George Karlaftis, a big piece of that, but some other guys as well. And they just employed a more aggressive style, and that's the way you have to do it. If you can get home to the quarterback, you can be more successful, and that's going to be a theme moving forward this year. Again, as I said in the open, there aren't going to be massive schematic changes here. It's mostly personnel changes, and that's what you would like to have. You don't want to overhaul scheme year after year after year, especially when you've had coaches leave voluntarily. Losing Brad Lambert certainly is not ideal after how well he transformed the defense, but what can Ron English do? Who does he have? What's he got on the field? We will start up front with that defensive line. And man, just looking at it on paper, looking at the roster, looking at depth charts, this is as deep of a position group as I can remember Purdue having in the trenches. Offensive line, defensive line. I can't ever remember Purdue being this deep in those areas. It starts in the middle for Purdue, where you have two returning starters, Branson Dean and Lawrence Johnson. These guys are both redshirt seniors, homegrown guys from Indiana. Dean down from Indianapolis, Johnson from up in Fort Wayne. They've just played a lot of football. You go back, if I remember correctly, Lawrence Johnson started that game at Nevada in 2019. That feels like an eternity ago. Elijah Sindelar was the quarterback at that point. It was so long ago. So he's played a bunch of football. Branson Dean didn't see as much action in 2019, but, continually there in 2020, 2021. He was honorable mention All Big Ten last year. Those guys are going to provide a foundation for this defense that you really like, that you can feel good about with their experience and with their ability. Now, one of the bigger depth pieces on this unit has now changed. DeMar-J Lewis got some really good experience last year as a redshirt freshman when he transferred in from Indiana. He was going to be a key contributor behind Dean and Johnson there on the inside. Last week, though, in practice, he suffered an ankle injury. DeMar-J Lewis will be out for the season. That's a bummer. It's a real bummer. He's a real promising player. You saw it last year. The coaches liked what they saw last year. And by all accounts, that development was continuing well. Things were looking good there. Instead, Lewis is going to be done for the year. That's a bummer. It helps, especially in hindsight, that Purdue did bring over a transfer in former Penn State defensive tackle Cole Brevard, redshirt sophomore, massive, 6'3", 315 pounds. He is a unit on the interior of that defensive line. Former four-star recruit out of Carmel. He's back, and I think now, especially without Lewis, he's going to be someone that sees some serious action at the defensive tackle spot, getting in reps behind Dean and Johnson. Some other guys you might see in the middle. Prince Boyd came in last year as a transfer. Saw a little bit of action. He may see an uptick in time this year. DJ Washington, former offensive lineman, converted to defensive tackle ahead of last season. Saw some action in that first game or two. I remember him making a pretty big stop against Oregon State, but he suffered a season-ending injury. And then Mo Amonade, true freshman from West Lafayette High School, a late add to the 2022 class from Purdue. I think he may crack the rotation as well. You hear good things about him. They are liking what they're seeing. Nice add to the class there if he may see some action as a true freshman at a position that's not always the easiest to hop into right away. The depth continues, though, as you look at the outside for Purdue of that defensive line. Jack Sullivan is back. He got some really extended playing time going back to 2020 when George Karlaftis was hurt that season. Certainly saw some action last year, spelling him a little bit. Sullivan's going to be the guy there at that defensive end spot this year. He's played some football for you. I'm interested to see what he can do. See if he can become a little bit more of a threat in the pass rush game. But it's good to have someone with that experience there. And on the flip side, Kydron Jenkins was an awesome surprise last year as a sophomore. He tied George Karlaftis for the team lead, had 5 sacks. He's nice and athletic at that Leo position. And really, he did a nice job because the presence and production from DeMarcus Mitchell certainly were not a constant last year. Things were a little bit rocky at times there, so he stabilized the Leo position nicely, and he will be back to man it again this year, but it's not without competition by any means. Scotty Humpich came in for Murray State. He's ready to get to the quarterback. He is going to see some time, without a doubt there. He'll be number 46 on the roster. I wouldn't be surprised to see Humpich and Jenkins at close to a 50-50 split there. That'll be really interesting. Now, I don't know exactly where some of these guys line up between defensive end and Leo. Slightly different roles, but at the end of the day, you want them both to get to the passer. Redshirt freshman Corday Sidnor looked fantastic in the spring game. He had a couple of sacks, and I thought he was really impressive for a guy who had just finished up his first year with the program at the end of spring ball. I was very impressed with what I saw. Interested to see if he cracks that rotation well. I think we'll see him without a doubt. Joe Anderson came in as a South Carolina transfer. Those SEC transfers are always interesting because whether folks like it or not, those schools recruit pretty well. Those rosters are usually pretty talented. I'm interested to see what we get from him. Purdue fans have been longing for Yanni Karlaftis to get on the field. I think he's kind of got to figure out whether it's going to be a Leo role, whether it's going to be a linebacker role, exactly where he will be. But maybe he'll get on the field more this year and start going after the quarterback like his older brother did. Purdue does have 2 of their most highly regarded recruits from the 2022 class in this group as well. Nick Carraway, we've talked about him on the show a number of times, especially last December and January when he was shooting up the recruiting rankings after and during his performance at the Army All-American Bowl. I would be shocked if we don't see him on the field this year. You hear fantastic things about him. You hear how the coaches talk about him, and it's impressive. I'm excited to see what he can do. He's someone who could be that next great Purdue pass rusher. And then Joe Strickland from Indianapolis-Brebeuf. He was a heck of a recruiting win for Purdue last year. 4-star recruit. Picked Purdue over Indiana. And that was a time where after that 2020 season, all the LEO stuff down there had some serious momentum. Whether Strickland is a true freshman contributor or not, again, that's tough to do. That's not easy. These are positions where you got to be big, you got to be strong, you got to be physical. I'm not saying he isn't, but it's a lot to ask for a true freshman. Look, this is a group that you feel really good about playing a lot of guys. I can't remember seeing Purdue this deep on the defensive line, and that's really encouraging. Mark Hagan, phenomenal position coach. I love what he's going to do with this group. There is one question, of course, and it's a bit of an elephant in the room. Who can emerge as a legitimate playmaker? You lose George Karlaftis. He was unbelievable. First-round pick for a reason. When DeMarcus Mitchell was 100%, like we saw in the bowl game, he was a real threat too. Don't be surprised if he sticks around that Patriots roster a little bit because he can play. Purdue wants to have that aggressive defense. They're not going to be afraid to bring more than 4. There's certainly no doubt about that. But if you can get home with 4, it's very critical to having as good of a defense this year as Purdue did last season in 2021 when they went 8-4 and then won the bowl game to get to 9 wins. Moving back a level on the defense, if you ask me, I think the linebacking group is the most uncertain position group, especially on the defense, but it also has Purdue's best defensive player and maybe the best player on the roster. That is Jalen Graham. He is an absolute stud. He can do so much out of that linebacker position. From this position group, he's the one guy you feel really good about dropping into pass coverage. Certainly helps that he came in as a safety, but he can go cover guys. You can go send him just as a roamer and go make plays in the backfield in the run game. You can go send him to get the passer on a blitz. Oregon State's quarterback, the kid that wasn't all that good, is still having nightmares from that. He's an all Big Ten type of player. There was a report a week ago that Jalen Graham had a slight hamstring tweak in practice. Purdue's been real careful with him ever since, as they should be, as they will continue to be. By a mile, he's the most important piece to this defense, so they're not going to push him any too hard to get him on the field earlier in practice. You do have some serious age in this linebacking group, though. Kyron Douglas is back for a second year starting at linebacker. Former Army transfer is now a 6th-year senior. And the last time we saw him on the field for a real game, he made 14 tackles against Tennessee. That was pretty impressive. He's Purdue's top returning tackler. I think he had a handful more than Jalen Graham did a year ago. He's going to be back. He'll be a solid piece for the defense. Joining him and Jalen Graham in that linebacking group will be Samisi Fakasieki, back for year 7 at Purdue. He missed all of last season after an injury in fall camp. I think that was first or second day even. It was really early. But it is year 6 of Jeff Brom. We finally have the final Darrell Hazel recruit remaining on the roster. Crazy to think it. Someone from the Hazel era is still around, but Fakasieki's played a good amount of football at Purdue. 2018, 2019, 2020. Was at the Leo position before he moved back to inside linebacker. For sure going to be more of a run stopper there. Moving back from the line will certainly cause you to project there. That's what you have for a starting 3, though, with Douglas and Fakasieki on the inside with Jalen Graham, able to do a little bit more on the outside. There is a little bit of depth here, though. O.C. Brothers is in his 2nd year, transferred in from Auburn last summer. 12 tackles a year ago, but I think it's interesting that 3.5 of his 12 tackles were for a loss. He's more of an athletic linebacker than what you have in that starting group with Douglas and Fakasieki. The game awareness probably needs to improve, needs to get to spots better and beat the ball to spots better, but he got better at that throughout the season. Some special teams reps definitely helped as well. If he continues to grow that awareness, I think you're going to see him maybe not move into a starting role, although he probably could, but against teams that are a little more pass heavy, against teams that are a little bit more side to side than up and down, you may see O.C. Brothers in there more just because he's a little bit more fleet-footed than what Purdue has starting currently. Looking at some more depth, Clyde Washington and Jacob Wahlberg are a pair of juniors who have been on the roster for a while. I think they project as guys who can add some depth, handle snaps here and there. We saw Washington on the field in the bowl game when Purdue was pretty thin as a whole, held his own, and Wahlberg has seen some action on special teams in the past. Look, I do think this is Purdue's thinnest position group when you look at it. Jalen Alexander is an underrated loss. Thought it clearly, the interest probably wasn't there, but if Purdue could have gotten Jalen Alexander back from last year's team, that could have really helped. He don't know what he's up to now. I know the Bears had him in for OTAs or whatever it is in the spring, but he's going to be a big piece to replace because he was your leading tackler by a mile last year. I do think, though, with what Purdue has in both, up front and in the linebacking group, this could be a better defense against the run than it was last year. I didn't love Purdue against the run last year. You saw times, those Wisconsin games, the singular Wisconsin game, they only played them once, but the Minnesota game, Ohio State was different. Travion Henderson's unbelievable. But, games against more physical teams, you'd like to see Purdue try to force teams to pass, because if you want to go on the road and beat Minnesota, you want to go on the road and beat Wisconsin, and you feel like you have the better quarterback, which I think Purdue does, make those quarterbacks go toe-to-toe with O'Connell rather than just letting him run the ball the way Wisconsin did last year when Graham Mertz barely had to do anything. Against the pass, this isn't as great of a linebacking crew. Jalen Graham is awesome. Again, maybe that's where we see O.C. Brothers factor in a little bit more, but we'll get into the defensive backs here momentarily, and you can do more with them. That's a deeper unit, so it'll be interesting to see how all of this works. I think we could see different personnel groups from week to week quite a bit, depending on what Purdue is playing against. Moving into that defensive back unit, this group has not been at full strength for fall camp by any means, but Purdue sure hopes it is for the night of September 1st when they take on Penn State. We're less than 3 weeks away, folks. We are almost there. After only playing in 2 games before a season-ending injury last year, Corey Trice will be a starter at corner. And look, physically, he is as impressive as it gets. He's big, long, rangy at 6'3". Former safety, that has really helped him with his ball skills. He's the best NFL prospect in the defensive backfield for Purdue. Now, the downside is, of course, only played 2 games last year. One of those was an absolute blowout. And then the 2020 season, only 6 games. So he's never played a full season. Really only started seeing the field midway through 2019. Again, you got to like what you have in him, but you got to keep him healthy and got to hope that he continues to progress as the year goes on. Jamari Brown is also recovering from an injury, but when you hear Jeff Brom talk, he still thinks Trice will be ready to go week 1, and he thinks Jamari Brown will be ready to go week 1. Brown transferred in from Kentucky ahead of last season, but got some serious action after Corey Trice went down. He moved into the starting lineup across from Dedrick Mackey. He really improved as the year went along. He kept getting better and better. I think you feel really good about your starting duo of Trice and Brown, if that's what it is. Now, with how healthy they are, it's going to be interesting to see how everyone factors in. There are some transfers in the cornerback grouping that are definitely going to make an impact, starting with Reese Taylor. He's a native Indiana kid, went down to Bloomington and made an impact for a true 4 years there. hopped in the transfer portal, and is now at Purdue. I don't know whether he'll line up at outside corner or at nickel, but I expect to see him on the field quite a bit. He is a bit of a Swiss Army knife. He's someone you can do quite a bit with. I think even at Indiana, he saw some snaps on the offensive side of the ball. That won't happen at Purdue, but he's going to see the field. He's a good athlete. T. Denson from Kansas State, I know they're high on him, but he's still coming back from a hernia surgery over the summer. May or may not be ready for Penn State. I think he's the one who you really have questions about. And then Bryce Hampton from Adams State. He's a bit more of an unknown, but the few times I got to go out to practice, hey, he's out there with some of the better groupings. Again, with guys limited, can he play a significant role? I think he's someone who, again, you hope he's versatile enough to play both slot and an outside corner. That's going to be interesting to see. But with those transfer, they've added some nice depth to this room to really help take pressure off of the safety room a little bit, because you looked at last year and you thought, man, we got our 2 starters back, and Cam Allen is back. It's going to be his 4th season starting at safety. He's been a mainstay there since he broke into the rotation back in 2019. Look, the guy's got awareness. He's become a pretty savvy guy back at safety. He gets to the ball well. He makes plays. Had, 3 or 4 interceptions last season. And that veteran presence is going to be very good. You have him. You have Trice. You have some guys who have played a good amount of football at Purdue, been around the team for a while. You have a nice leadership group in that back end. And you would have had Marvin Grant sharpied in as the other starting safety. He would have been back for year 2 or 3 as a starter. I can't remember how much he started in 2020. But he elected to transfer. He ended up at Kansas. Don't know that that's what he had in mind, but that's where he's at. So Chris Jefferson moves into the other safety spot after mostly playing nickel a year ago. And he really got more comfortable as the season went along. He turned in to a really nice addition for Purdue. He's another guy. He has just played a lot of football. Not all of it's been at the Division I level. That certainly is a whole world different, but this could be a pretty good pair in pass coverage. I think Purdue gets better in pass coverage with Jefferson sliding in at safety over Marvin Grant, but no doubt Marvin Grant going downhill to be a force in the run game, you will miss that. I mean, he is absolutely built. He's a unit. You will miss having him, especially in the run game, but I do think you get a little bit more ball hawkish at safety with Jefferson in there. Some other guys who could slot in. Sanusi Kane, he was hurt at the end of spring practice, but he did see the field quite a bit against Tennessee. If he's 100% for the start of the season, maybe you see him slide in if there's an injury. Antonio Stevens, was great to see him back on the field at the spring game. That injury he suffered against Nebraska back in 2020 was brutal. He'll factor in as a depth piece. And then Javon Grigsby is there as well. Kid out of Louisiana, going to be in his 2nd year with the program. Just adding depth to the defensive backfield at safety. The question with this group, and of course outside of health, I think that's a big key here. You already have a few guys at corner that are banged up a little bit, but, it's tied in with the defensive line. Defensive line did a really nice job getting home quite a bit last year, only bringing 4 guys. And if the defensive line doesn't get as much pressure, you're either asking your secondary to hold their coverage for longer while that defensive line tries to get home, or you have to install and bring more exotic blitz packages to get the ball out of that quarterback hands quicker. Whether that is going to happen or not, I don't know. Again, losing George Karlaftis, losing DeMarcus Mitchell, those are significant losses that Purdue has to replace. Can they still get home without having to bring additional help? I think that's the biggest question because, again, so much of the defensive backfield is tied in with getting pressure that it's hard to talk about those two groups without referencing one another. Going to be really interesting to see how that unfolds right away against Penn State because they're going to be challenged right away. Moving in to talk special teams here for a minute because it wasn't Purdue's best unit last year. They did replace their special teams coordinator. Marty Biaggi is now down in Oxford with Ole Miss. So Purdue brought in Carl Maslowski. He'll be taking over a special teams unit where he inherits starters at both kicker and punter. Mitchell Finneran was a graduate transfer from Samford a year ago. Started strong, went through a bit of a slump in October, and then finished strong. He was 24 of 29 on the year, but really had mostly short kicks. Only had one attempt over 40 yards on the season, and that, oddly enough, was his first attempt of the season. 48-yard make that got Purdue on the board for the season against Oregon State. But my question is, what difference is Jeff Brom comfortable sending him out there? I mean, is it just 40 and in? Does that go out to 45? Does it go out to 50? Purdue had to settle for a lot of field goals last year. Ideally, you're not kicking 29 field goals. But how far is that range? How far are you comfortable sending that unit out there and feeling confident that they're going to come back to the sideline with 3 points on the board? Finneran is reliable inside, though. He's good to have, and you hope he remains as consistent as he was from late October on last season. The punting game, a little bit different. Certainly not as consistent. Purdue was the Big Ten's worst in punting last season. Jack Ansell came over on scholarship from Australia, was supposed to be more of a game-changing punter, just wasn't consistent as a freshman. 38 yards per punt, not enough. Jeff Brom expressed some frustration about that during the season. I remember once on the radio show, he really got into it about his team's kicking group, punt team, and even made a move at times. I think Brendan Cropsey punted a handful. He's a walk-on who's still on the team. So Ansell's going to have the first crack at it this year. He's going to have the first chance to lock down that punter spot. He's on scholarship after all, but Brendan Cropsey's going to be right there on his heels. And at the end of the day, Purdue just needs to improve there. It's plain and simple. I'm of the opinion that Purdue's going to play in a lot of close games this year, and the little things really matter when you're playing in a close game every week, and punting is a little thing that can matter a heck of a lot. The return game, not Purdue's brightest area, historically or recently. Haven't returned a kickoff for a touchdown in pushing a decade now. But Charlie Jones is transferring from Iowa. Maybe that changes the outlook there. We will discuss his usage as a wide receiver in next week's episode when we look at the offense. But he was a first-team All-Big Ten return man in 2021. How much kickoff returning he does, I think we'll see. If he's going to be one of your top-line receivers, I don't know if you send him back there on kickoffs. He will be your punt returner, though. I'd be very surprised if he's not. And maybe he can infuse something into that area. Purdue's been very fair catch heavy in punt return the last few years. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I don't mind it. But you do always, you're always open to taking a chance of gaining some yards when you can. If Jones doesn't do kickoffs, Reese Taylor, as I said, he's a bit of a Swiss Army knife. He can do a lot for you. He has experience returning kicks at IU. Deion Burks is a legitimate speed guy, slot receiver. He could factor in at kickoff as well. But look, that's it for defense and special teams. It's so fun. I love doing these episodes just because we get to talk about so many names, so many guys that may not factor in August or September, but by November, they're on the field. Football's a game of attrition throughout the season. Guys are in, guys are out. And having depth the way Purdue does, especially at the defensive line and in the defensive backfield, man, that's so big. That's something Jeff Brahms really worked at developing at Purdue, and he finally has it now. Last year's group was really good. It was better than I think anyone expected. If they can put up the same type of effort on defense that they did a year ago, boy, I think you ought to feel really good about this team. That's a big bar to eclipse or at least meet. But man, if you can do it, the sky's the limit for this team. I did want to touch on the Big Ten media rights negotiations before we get out of here today because it's fascinating. It is massively important to the future of the Big Ten and college athletics as a whole. There is an incredible amount of money being poured into this. And the one thing that I want to make sure I say first and foremost is that this is entirely about football. Basketball is hardly a thought in these conversations. It's not a moneymaker. We heard the number this past week that CBS is looking to pay $350 million per year for that 3:30 kickoff to be filled with a Big Ten game. Currently, CBS pays, I think, $10 million for its basketball package with the Big Ten for the Sunday afternoon games. So this is entirely about football. CBS, though, looking to come in and get that Big Ten slot in 3:30, I think that's massive. I think the CBS 3:30 game is the best produced game of the week every week of the year. It's been awesome. The music is awesome. The pageantry around it is great. I think it's awesome. They lose the SEC after next year. ABC, ESPN paid $300 million for that, so the Big Ten's getting more money from CBS. The big news, though, is around ABC, ESPN, because it doesn't sound like, and barring a 11th hour change in these negotiations, the Big Ten will be on ESPN or ABC anymore starting in 2024. That'll be the first time in 40-some years that the Big Ten hasn't been on ESPN, ABC. And the question comes down to, is that a big deal? 10, 15 years ago, this would have been unthinkable. You wouldn't have even considered an option that didn't include being on ESPN. I think both answers can be valid here. Folks have wondered, is ESPN going to stop covering the Big Ten? I don't know. Maybe. I'm not going to say it's impossible. I think if you're the Big Ten, you would like them to maintain some rights to college football playoff coverage after 2026 when that contract expires. Because if they have college football playoff coverage, they will be talking about the playoff picture. And if it's an expanded playoff, there are going to be 2 to 3 Big Ten teams in there every year. Again, this is all about football, but ESPN doesn't talk college hoops outside of March. They really don't. They have the game day show that's down to an hour long now, isn't it? I mean, it's not like ESPN has the same hold on the sports conversation that it used to. I used to, growing up, it was Sports Center every morning, and I'd come home from school, excuse me, and it would be around the horn. It would be PTI. It would be at the Sports Center at 6 o'clock. This was a daily routine, but I don't watch those anymore. The conversation has changed. I'm sure the vast majority of you that are listening to this right now, this probably isn't the only sports podcast you listen to. I mean, how much do you even watch Big Ten Network? It's the own conference, but just watching games and watching games is still critically a part of it. But the programming on TV talking about sports doesn't have the monopoly that it used to. It sounds like NBC may be coming for a night game. I mean, I think this could be incredible. I think you would have a situation where Fox has the big noon kickoff. That's still going to be the number one Big Ten slot. So you have the number one slot at noon, the number two slot at 3:30, and the number three spot at 7:30 or 8 on NBC. You have a big time game on national broadcast TV all day. I know broadcast TV isn't as critical as it once was now that cable subscriptions are down, but hey, Fox is still going to have the majority of games. They own the majority of the Big Ten network, so you'll see games on FS1, on BTN. I think this is going to be fascinating to see what comes out. Will there be a streaming service come in and have a game exclusively on a streaming service, like a Amazon or an Apple TV? Maybe. The NFL is doing it. That, if you don't know already, once you get ready for Thursday night football starting week 2, it's only going to be on Amazon. So you're going to have to subscribe if you want to watch NFL games on Amazon. It's going to be a different experience. That's the way the future is going to go. But the Big Ten is going to make unbelievable money off of this. From a basketball perspective, I don't think not being on ESPN is necessarily ideal. I think you would like to still have a presence there, but that's not what this is about. It's about maximizing revenue for each school. This is going to do it. I know there are still lingering questions about whether more expansion is on the way. I've been pretty consistent from the start that I didn't think the Big Ten was going to keep going out west without reason to. And I've always said that reason would be in South Bend, Indiana. Last week, Jack Swarbrick, the Notre Dame athletic director, came out and made zero indication that they have much of an interest in joining a conference full-time in football. I don't think that's going to change. I think you're waiting on the ACC to break up or something to happen with the ACC before there is any more expansion on the way. It'd be foolish to rule anything out. I know better than that. But just based off the sounds of things, I don't know that anything is going to change. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for spending time with me. Next week, we flip sides of the ball to preview the Brom offense for his 6th season there, led by Aiden O'Connell. It will be a fun group to preview with a whole lot of new weapons. Be sure, subscribe to Boilers and Beyond wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss that episode. Follow the show on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. Hang out, join the conversation in the meantime. Let me know what you thought of this week's episode. I always love the conversation with you all. But hey, until next week, take care.